Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today we're going to talk about style theft. It's an issue that's been dividing the art community for a long time now, and while I hadn't discussed it prior to this simply because I thought the discourse surrounding it was dying down, time has shown that that is absolutely not the case, and there are still many artists out there regularly fighting over whether or not it's possible to steal an art style. The final nail in the coffin for me that really made me decide to give the topic its own dedicated video was when I saw a Reddit post talking about how artists shouldn't share techniques with each other because they worked really hard to develop them, and other artists shouldn't get a shortcut with which to steal them for their own work. Which I didn't even know how to respond to, because my god does that take the style theft issue to a whole new level. Now even art education is being impacted by this debate, and if artists are being told they shouldn't help each other learn because they might steal a style or have theirs stolen, there's something wrong, and I want to talk about it. Before I do though, let me take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Wingfox, a platform that will never stand between you and art education. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know how much I love Wingfox. They're an online learning platform specifically dedicated to all forms of art, and they pretty much have an in-depth course available from a skilled industry professional for any aspect or medium of art that you could possibly want to learn or improve on. I've taken many of their courses myself in the past, and this time they let me try out one called Character Illustration Design for Games, which contains 28 classes and 15 hours of educational content taught by a professional concept artist that's actively working in the gaming industry. It was incredibly informative, detailed, and broke the artist's entire process down into easy to follow and understand steps in a way that was helpful not just for beginners, but for any digital artist trying to improve their skills. Every single Wingfox course I've taken has taught me something new that I didn't know and was able to use to make my art better. And I mean it with experience and sincerity when I say that their content is unbelievably valuable and helpful. They're currently having an Easter sale, so for a limited time you can use coupon code HPED to get 20% off any of their courses. So please go check them out via the links in the description. I've linked the course that I took this month as well because I think a lot of you guys would find it just as helpful as I did. Thank you so much to Wingfox for sponsoring today's video, and again, please go check them out to take your art to the next level. All that aside, let's get into the video. What is style theft, and why are people in such passionate disagreement about whether or not it's a problem? Well, technically, style theft refers to the practice of copying the way another artist draws, working on the assumption that every individual artist's style is completely unique and owned by them. And it's no surprise that that's contentious. It goes without saying that style is incredibly important to artists. It's what sets their work apart from other artists, gives them their own unique individuality, and is often something that they've spent years developing and perfecting. An incredible amount of importance is placed on creating a compelling, appealing, distinctive style for your art. And while I don't think that importance is actually all that well placed, something I discuss more in a very old video linked in the iCard above, I do understand that as a result of it, artists can be really protective of their styles, and rightfully so. All of us do, consciously or subconsciously, put an exceptional amount of time and effort into establishing and refining each individual aspect of our styles and combining them into something that's original to us. So it's more than understandable that if we feel like those styles are being deliberately copied by others, it might bother us. But the problem arises when we try to objectively define what it actually means to copy a style, and whether or not it's even possible to own one at all, because that becomes significantly harder to quantify. As a result, the art community is very divided between those who believe it's morally and even legally condemnable to quote-unquote steal an art style, and those who believe it's not even possible to do so in the first place. In this video, I'm going to explain both sides of that debate, how the demonization of so-called art style theft is harmful to artists and the community as a whole, the role of originality in art, and why, in my opinion, style theft is almost completely impossible. But while I'll try to be as objective as humanly possible, please do note that, as always, these are just my opinions, and I by no means intend to state them as if they're fact. You're more than welcome to disagree, and I honestly encourage you to share those disagreements in the comments if you do, respectfully, of course, because I recognize how nuanced this issue is, and I think open discussion is the only way we can ever reach a better understanding of it. But with all of that preamble out of the way, I think a good place to start when dissecting this issue is with the definition of art style itself. An art style is the culmination of many stylistic choices that an artist makes consistently throughout their work, something that often goes misunderstood when it comes to this issue. Those who argue in favor of art style theft being not only real, but legitimately problematic, seem to view it more as one completely unique thing, rather than a combination of a million tiny derivative things. And to an extent, I can understand why. If you mix 20 different colors of paint in different quantities, the resulting color will be unique compared to the individual colors used to create it, but it will still be a combination of colors that already existed and can therefore be recreated. As a result, you can't claim that color as yours because you mixed all of those existing colors in your individual way to make it. It's still just a mix of all of them, and while you can be known for using that color in your work, you don't own it. Even so, diminishing that color as just a combination of those existing paints would be reductive, because you would still have been the one to determine the exact combinations and quantities required to create it, and you would still be the one choosing how to utilize it and when, all of which makes it more unique than any one single paint used to make it. Art style, as I'm sure you've gathered by now, is no different. It's a combination of every single stylistic choice you choose to make in your work. The weight of your line art, the variation in your line art, the way you pose your characters, the focus of your compositions, the proportions of your anatomy, the way you exaggerate certain features or depict others realistically, your use of color, the way you shade. I could go on forever because there are a million things that contribute to what your style is, and while the combination of them is uniquely yours, those individual things are not. And that is exactly where the nuance of this issue comes in, because it begs multiple questions. 1, do you own that combination of stylistic choices even if you don't own any of the individual aspects that created it? And 2, if someone copies one or a few of your stylistic choices, none of which were yours to begin with, does that really mean they're stealing your style? If copying 1 or 2 isn't theft, then how many is? It obviously can't be objectively determined, so it's no surprise that controversy is the result. Take my art, for example. My color palettes were largely inspired by artists like Nemupan, Omocat, and Arcstar. The way I do line art was inspired by manga, a million DeviantArt tutorials, and a speed paint I watched when I was 12. The way I shade hair was also a result of a million different tutorials, which I watched one after the other and just implemented different techniques from each on top of whichever ones I wanted to keep from the previous one. The way I draw eyes is inspired by Genshin Impact, Persona, and a ridiculous amount of anime consumption. I can't even remember the majority of my own influences, because so many of them have piled on top of each other over the years, and the style I have now is an ever-changing result of everything I see and am inspired by on a daily basis. So if someone copies an aspect of my style intentionally, they're actually just copying an aspect of someone else's, because whether it was conscious or not, I copied that aspect from them just as they did from someone else. Can I blame them for copying me when I copied that choice from someone else? It may be easy to say, okay, if they just copied the way you draw line art, that's not style theft, but they also copied your color palette and the way you draw eyes, so now it is. Well, the way I choose colors and draw eyes was also inspired by others. Yes, my combination of inspirations and influences is unique, but they're all still derivative of others. So how many of those aspects can be copied by another before they're considered to be copies of my style rather than copies of the original? When are we using the same reds and blues to make purple, and when are you trying to make my purple specifically? It's impossible to determine for sure, which is exactly why art style theft is such a contentious issue, especially given that it's not even agreed upon whether it's wrong to try to copy someone's individual purple either. So naturally, if a significant controversy in the art community is based entirely on something that can't even be defined, it's going to be difficult to realistically evaluate. As an outsider looking in, we can't objectively assess, by viewing the art of others, whether or not they deliberately copied one or more aspects of another artist's style, because it's impossible to know their influences and inspirations, and whether or not they were even consciously aware of their implementation of the techniques derived from them. The artist in question can't even be completely aware of every style they've quote-unquote copied throughout their lives that led to their current style, because there are just so many that influence all of us every day. We can't help but be inspired by the work of others and the things that we see, and whether we intend it to or not, our work will reflect that. And even those who do believe art style theft to be real, bad, and a pervasive problem tend to recognize that, and rarely condemn artists who are simply influenced and inspired by certain aspects of other artists' work, focusing their criticisms instead on those who copy those aspects on purpose. This is a problem in and of itself though, because we've established that it's impossible to determine, without asking, whether an artist did copy those stylistic choices on purpose or not just by looking at their work. So for them to act as if they're able to judge whether an artist deliberately chose to or not, and therefore whether or not they're morally blameworthy, is both arrogant and ignorant. They can't. This regularly leads to artists harassing each other over claims of one copying or stealing the other's style based solely on certain aspects of it being present in both, with absolutely no way for the accuser to prove that the accused actually did, leading to baseless and unresolvable drama and harassment as a result. But the bigger problem is that all of that is built upon the belief that it's wrong to copy an art style, and we need to talk about that next, because in these instances, artists often claim innocence because they were just inspired by the styles of others, not trying to actively copy any aspect of them. which implies that if they were trying to copy them, that would be a bad thing worthy of criticism. But is it? We've established by now that every artist's style is created by combining a million different stylistic choices, all of which are derived consciously or subconsciously from other artists or the things that we see. So if our styles are inevitably going to be influenced by those of others anyway, why is it wrong to consciously decide to seek out those influences and implement those stylistic choices on purpose? If I'm going to be subconsciously influenced by the way Shiro Miwa draws line art and end up changing the way I draw line art as a result, would it not be the same, or dare I say better, to objectively analyze his line art, figure out what I like about it so much, and then deliberately choose to implement those things in my own? The result is ultimately the same, but if done intentionally and consciously, it could be vastly more well implemented and effective. And that is the only difference. So why is that being demonized? Why is it being seen as bad to look at the style of an artist you admire and choose to draw something the way they do? Well, it's all based on the idea that true originality in art not only exists, but is incredibly important, which is a flawed perspective in and of itself. Critics of so-called art style theft believe that their style, despite being a combination of existing techniques and stylistic choices derived from others, is completely original, and that therefore any effort to copy it is morally wrong. Some even go out of their way, as I mentioned in the intro, to hide the way they draw and the techniques they use to create their style, just so that others can't do the same. And this, in my opinion, is misguided, unjustified, and harmful, because true originality doesn't even exist, and it is certainly not something that artists should be claiming to have achieved and therefore weaponizing against others. Like I said, art style is like combining a bunch of different paints in different quantities to make another color. And while that color may be relatively unique, it's never impossible to replicate because it's made of those that already existed. You can mix red and blue to make your own personal shade of purple, and you can even throw in some white or brown or black to make it even more uniquely yours. But at the end of the day, the shade of purple you made existed before you made it, and someone somewhere already made it, because we all have the same palette of colors to work with. So attacking someone else for painting with a similar shade of purple is utterly ridiculous, because someone painted with it long before you did too, and how would you feel if they attacked you for doing the same? My point is that yes, every artist's style is unique to some degree because they are implementing their own individual combination of stylistic choices and filtering them through the lens of their perception and the inspiration that they have while they work. The way they interpret what they see, how they want to make those stylistic choices, who they want to draw like, and so on, results in a combination that is uniquely theirs. And that might be the closest thing to originality that human beings can realistically achieve. But the way they achieved that result was not original. They used techniques and inspirations that already existed. And the only thing about their art that's potentially original is the way that their mind, with all of its unique experiences, influences, and skills, put those techniques together. Based on that logic, the only thing that makes art original to any degree is the artist itself interpreting and creating it, not any part of the process they use to do so. Two artists could make the exact same stylistic choices and create entirely different pieces and styles all together, because it's not their techniques alone that make their work original, but rather the way they interpret and implement them. Therefore, another artist choosing to draw in a similar style to yours cannot possibly be infringing upon your originality, because they can't. Beyond that, can we just take a minute here to also discuss why we're so obsessed with originality anyway? Like, I understand that we all, as artists, inherently want our work to be recognized as uniquely ours and appreciated for that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to create something as close to our version of original as we can as a result. After all, it's not just about recognition or validation, it's also about business. If you want to be a professional artist, a lot of your success will likely end up being closely intertwined with your style. The people who hire you, depending on your specific field, will likely do so because of your style. So the more unique and original it is, the more work you'll end up getting, because there are less artists out there who can do what you do, and there's less competition. Success as an artist often means trying to set yourself apart from other artists in one way or another, and style is often the way that's achieved. So in that regard, I completely understand why originality as a concept would be highly sought after and coveted, but it is just a concept. Striving to be as close to original as you can in your art is perfectly fine, and probably a good move if you're trying to make art your job, honestly. But claiming that your style is objectively original isn't just a flawed perspective, it's an impossible assertion. An original work is commonly defined as a work of art that was not received from others nor copied based on the work of others. And that alone tells us that originality quite simply does not exist, because we've established that whether it's conscious or subconscious, we're all copying the work of others to one degree or another. The act of copying alone, subsequently, should not be viewed as wrong when it comes to style, since style can never be original. And the only aspect of art that potentially can be at all is the filtering of that style through the individual artist's minds and skills. That said, all of these arguments so far have been built upon the idea that the artist copying another artist's style is doing so with good intentions, and I would be failing failing at communicating the nuance of this issue if I didn't address the significance of those intentions when it comes to the morality of it. There is a very big difference between looking at an artist's style, liking it, and choosing to implement certain aspects of it into your own work to further develop and grow your own style, compared to looking at their style and deciding to completely replicate it altogether. It once again brings us back to the impossible question of how many elements of another artist's style can you copy before that constitutes style theft? And while we can't answer that objectively, the closest we can come to doing so is considering their intentions. We can't measure how many stylistic choices an artist can copy before it's no longer inspiration and is instead replication, but we can consider whether or not copying their whole style was the goal to begin with. Again, we can't know that by looking at another artist's work, but we can be consciously aware of it in ourselves at the very least. Because the absolute only time I will personally give style theft any credence is when an artist isn't trying to grow their own style by taking inspiration from aspects of someone else's, but is instead legitimately trying to one-to-one replicate another artist's style for any reason that isn't study. Because at that point, I can understand both ethical and business-based concerns. I still don't think it's prosecutable by any means because it is impossible to own a style, but I think that the artist being copied in that case would be well within their rights to at least object to it and take issue with it. If someone is legitimately trying to exactly replicate the way they draw for the sake of replicating it rather than for the sake of growing their own individual style, I personally see how that could be seen as disrespectful, scummy, and presumably malicious, because the only motives I can imagine them having in those cases are to steal that artist's business or to try to gain some of their popularity for themselves just by being as similar to them as possible, and neither of those are good. Still, unless the artist copying them actually admits to deliberately trying to copy them for that purpose, we can't possibly know if that's their intention or not. So I'm not bringing up the importance of intention when it comes to evaluating whether or not others are stealing styles. I'm bringing it up as important to consider for ourselves, because we're the only ones whose intentions we can truly know. I'm not saying it's cool to try to judge whether or not other artists are copying others maliciously. I'm saying that you should personally consider your own intentions when copying other styles if that is something you do. If your goal is to effectively make your art a clone of theirs, maybe don't do that. If your goal is to learn from their style and develop your own as a result, hell yeah, go for it. There's a reason art schools do master studies where students are tasked with recreating a master artist's work exactly so they can better understand why they made certain stylistic choices and why they were effective. Copying styles is a very helpful way to study and develop your own. But the goal should always be to use their techniques to draw like you, not to use their techniques to draw like them. If that makes sense. I don't know, it's late, I'm tired, and I've been rambling for so long. So that in mind, let's wrap this up. In conclusion, is style theft real? No, in my opinion, it is not, unless the artist is deliberately trying to draw exactly like another artist for the explicit purpose of passing their work off as theirs. All art is inspired by other art, and that being seen as a bad thing or a reason to harass other artists is doing nothing but harm to everyone in the community. It's good, normal, and productive to take stylistic inspiration from other artists, and no one owns the techniques that they use to create their work. True originality doesn't exist, and if anything close to it does, it's determined by who the artist is, not how they draw. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for being inspired by someone else. We all are, whether it's conscious or subconscious, and if you're gonna be inspired by another artist anyway, you may as well be inspired productively. Study the work of artists you admire, figure out what it is you like so much about their work, implement those things in your own work, and don't let anyone tell you that that's theft, because it's not. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and thank you for watching. Special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, Art of Amethyst Fable, and TC Pratt, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, Cora Fear, Elenkshi, Soul Crystal, Kim Yen, Shamil Sheep, Crazy Hassar, Gen Tong, Jacobus Peterson, Grayson Xavier, Tyfinch 94, Milk Bean, Eeyore Heehaw, MG, Eclectrica, Blah Mage, TC Pratt, Finn, Grim Spectre, Stephen Jett, and Theobald Leonhardt for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.